So kia ora koutou katoa, ko Simon McManus toku ingoa. Welcome to this Reboot webinar. It's rebooting the T-Tech conference for those of you that don't know. Today we are hosting the Innovators segment of the conference virtually. T-Tech is New Zealand's future transport conference, and it's the annual conference for ITS New Zealand. ITS, for those of you again who don't know, is New Zealand's peak body for ITS, that's Intelligent Transport Systems, and for future transport. We are connected to an international network of national ITS bodies around the world, and there's also an ITS World Congress, which normally takes place every year. Of course, COVID affected, just like we are. I guess our role as an organisation, with our members' support, there's a glimpse of our gold and silver and our academia members. We have a number of bronze and even individual members, about 60 of them. We advocate for the development and deployment of new solutions which make New Zealand's transport system safer, more efficient and sustainable. Moving on to today, innovation in New Zealand's transport technologies ranges from research and development, I should say world-leading research and development, to adapting and trialling emerging technologies and business models. Today's speakers, who you can see there on the slide in front of you, hopefully, are representative of just some of the exciting innovations in New Zealand right now. Innovations that we'll cover today include some in mobility. We'll touch on autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles and electric transport and charging, traffic management or transit enforcement, and also bringing some mobility and equity solutions as well. So all these solutions today have the potential to vastly improve New Zealand's transport network. And I hope you enjoy today's webinar. I'm going to start off by introducing the speakers. Again, you can see those guys there on the slide in front of you, hopefully. So we start off with Ed Wright, and this will be the order that we're presenting in today as well. So we're starting off with Edward Wright, who's the Principal Transport Advisor for Waka Katahi. Ed is in the public transport team at Waka Katahi. Prior to taking up this role, he was the manager of public transport strategy, planning and marketing at Environment Canterbury for 4 years. And in his time at Environment Canterbury, or ECAN, he was involved in the design and launch of the My Way by Metro on-demand public transport pilot in Timaru. Earlier in his career, Edward was involved in the recovery and redesign of the Christchurch bus network after the 2011 Christchurch earthquake. He's now Wellington-based. He does admit to being a proud Cantabrian and continues to be a mad Crusader supporter. Bless him. Next up, we have Jujnuovich, who is the Project Director for Redevelopment in Auckland for Kainga. Kainga creating a welcoming, supportive and connective community at a property called 139 Grays Avenue, smack bang in the centre of Auckland. This will be a first single site supported by a supported housing complex in Aotearoa, and is being built with features that enable a thriving, sustainable and connected community, ultimately improving outcomes for some of New Zealand's most vulnerable. Jane has been working for Kainga, formerly Housing New Zealand, for 17 years, and before that worked in mental health, residential social work, and developed and ran a social enterprise in London. Next up will be Elizabeth Yeaman, commonly known as Liz, well known around New Zealand. Liz has worked in the transport and energy sectors for over 30 years, prior to founding her business Retyna in 2018. Retyna is a consultancy focusing on transport electrification. She was the General Manager for Transport at ECA, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, where she led ECA's electric vehicle program. She's currently working on the new East by West electric ferry, assisting a major truck manufacturer introducing electric trucks to New Zealand, with an Australian state government on EV promotion. And I believe, and I hope Liz is happy for me to say, I think she's just joined the board of ChargeNet as well. Liz holds a master's degree in natural resource engineering and is a chartered member of Engineering New Zealand and a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in New Zealand. Next up, we'll have Mahmood Hikmet. Mahmood is the head of R&D at Ohmio and HMI Technologies and is tasked with overseeing and synchronizing R&D activity for the autonomous vehicle program and all other areas of research in those organizations. Mahmood is a science communicator and has a focus on bringing across technical information to non-technical stakeholders. Any of you who've seen his YouTube channel will see that he's working very hard on that at the moment. Throughout his career, Mahmood has been closely involved with the direct development of IoT infrastructure for ITS and mobility. Most recently, Mahmood oversaw the development of the first 5G connected autonomous shuttle in the world in conjunction with Spark here in New Zealand. He has a PhD in electronic and electrical engineering and a Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Systems from University of Auckland. Finally, we'll have Scott Hammond joining us from CSLI, that's CSL Infrastructure. Scott's experience ranges from installing the first ATMS, that's Advanced Traffic Management System, on the NZTA network, and project managing the ATMS motorway projects. Scott has about 20 years of combined transport and ITS experience, the bulk of which has been in Auckland, and his career has started more and more to specialise within ITS. For the last 6 years in particular, Scott has led CSLI's ITS department, a growing department I should say, and has been heavily involved with new research and innovation going on at CSLI, which we'll be hearing about later. So those are our presenters or our speakers for today. We'll be going through hearing their presentations one after the other, obviously, and then at the end of each presentation, we will have some questions for that speaker. Rather than saving up for questions at the end, we'll have questions following each speaker. You can pose your questions. Please do ask questions. I should remind you, us Kiwis typically need a bit of a prompt. So use the Q&A within the Zoom webinar platform. If you can, please include your organisation in the name field when you're posing your question. That helps give us context and helps our speakers give an answer which is perhaps more relevant to you. Please do also state who your question is for, as we have a number of speakers today. That would be great. Do try to be concise as possible and just one question at a time, please. All right, so we'll now move on to our speakers for today. It's starting with Edward Wright from Waka, Katahi. Ed, I'm going to pass the controls to you so you can take it away.
Great, thanks Simon. Kia ora koutou katoa. It's great to finally be doing this presentation. It's been a bit of a long time coming since when we were first hoping to back in June. Today I'm talking about the public transport on-demand trial in Timaru, the My Way service. And as Simon mentioned, I'm mainly talking from the perspective of my previous job, which was as the Manager of Strategy, Planning and Marketing for Public Transport at Environment Canterbury. Okay, let's hope we can advance these slides. Whoops. All right, first, I just want to talk about the partnership that's involved in My Way. So you can see the names of a number of organisations down the bottom of the screen there. So Waka Katahi, who I currently work for, are a key partner involved in this, alongside VIA, who are the technology provider, Ritchie's, who are the operator of the service, and the Timaru District Council. And of course, most importantly of all, Environment Canterbury, which is the regional council in the Canterbury area. The partnership element of this has been really important throughout. To give you some context, Timaru, which is in South Canterbury, has an urban population of 29,000. It had previously been served by 4 fixed bus routes. Patronage has been declining there for quite some time, despite a previous network redesign in 2013. And I was actually the one who did that network redesign, so obviously it didn't work out so well. So we realized that we needed to try something different, rather than just rearranging the deck chairs and expecting changing the routes again to have a significant impact. So on demand in Timaru. I'm just trying to advance the slide there and I'm not seeing it advance. Apologies. Here we go. So you probably heard a bit about demand responsive transport, and indeed ITS, I believe, has a webinar on this in a few weeks' time. In Timaru, on-demand public transport is flexible with no fixed route. You book in advance, either using an app or via a call centre. Environment Canterbury's been describing it as corner to corner rather than door to door. So you're not necessarily going to be picked up right outside your house like you might be with an Uber service. The app might direct you, or the instructions rather, might direct you out to the closest corner. And the rides can be shared, so they won't necessarily take the fastest route. It's a smaller size vehicle than a traditional bus, and you can see a photo behind me, and we'll advance onto another photo right now, which shows you that some of the vehicles are accessible and have a ramp, as you can see in this photo, rather like a traditional bus. So wheelchairs, prams, and the like can be carried. Not all of the vehicles are accessible, so there was facility within the app or via the call centre to say if you needed one, and then you would be dispatched an accessible vehicle. A key thing that was identified at the very outset of this project was that it's all about customer behaviour change and how critical that is. So Environment Canterbury spent a significant amount of time engaging with the community and doing a heck of a lot of work prior to getting to the launch stage. A unique brand was developed for the service. So as you may be aware, Metro is the overall brand for public transport in the Canterbury region, and the on-demand service has the specific brand of My Way. And then Environment Canterbury stepped through procuring technology and operator partners for the trial period, who, as I mentioned before, are VIA and Ritchie's respectively. Just advance the slide again. We seem to have got stuck on that slide. Here we go. Here's our brand. My Way by Metro. So here's some collateral that was used in the run-up to the launch last year. Unfortunately, like so many things over the last 18 months, COVID did impact on how things rolled out. The first beta stage of the trial had commenced just prior to the first COVID lockdown. It was with a closed group of users. We thought initially that we'd have to put the trial aside during the first COVID lockdown, but in fact, what happened was we launched the full service earlier than planned because it was realised that actually an on-demand service was just what was needed to help transport critical workers around Timaru rather than running the fixed route bus service. Another great advantage is that things like restrictions on the number of passengers in a vehicle can be easily implemented without the need for driver intervention, and it could be run as a cashless service. Please bear with me, we're just moving on. There we go. So the full launch and rollout happened in June 2020, once we're back into alert level 1 by that point. And as you can see, there's some folk at the launch itself. In terms of coverage, there's 1,649 virtual stops available in Timaru with an average walking distance of 50 metres. What the map on the right shows you in grey is the service area. And you can see the red dots there as well, which were the stops of the previous fixed route service. So you can see how coverage has been increased, particularly if you look at the top of the map into Washdike, which is an industrial suburb at the north end of Timaru. And out to the west, you can see some coverage areas as well that's on the left of the map that weren't covered previously. So there's a lot more coverage than there was previously. And indeed, in the areas where there were fixed routes, the coverage is better. Here's just a quick preview of what it looks like if you're booking within the map, within the app rather. It's very similar to the experience you might have with a rideshare service like Uber or Ola. Okay, I'll just move to the next slide and tell you a bit about the growth of the service. Of course, the period that the trial has been running has been heavily impacted by COVID, but the uptake was faster than expected. And the patronage in Timaru grew by 16% when compared to the previous fixed route service. And this is in an environment during COVID where patronage across the country has fallen. We're very happy to find how much senior users engaged with the service and the technology, because that was one of the key concerns, especially given the demographics of Timaru, whether older folk would be happy to use an app and so forth. And many have. Of course, some have also used the option of the call centre. At this point in time, one fixed route remains in place, and that's due to the demand at peak times, particularly driven by school demand. This map shows you a little bit about the usage. The pink, or purple rather, line on the map is the Timaru Link service, the fixed route that is still in place. And the bubbles on the map show you the demand that has been experienced in each area. For context, the CBD area of Timaru, you can sort of just see the end of the word Timaru in the middle of the map, and that's where the greatest intensity of use has been. And down at the bottom, the hospital is sort of the big bubble at the bottom, and another major mall is the bubble towards the middle of the map itself. So there's been really good usage, and as you can see, it's been right across the coverage area. There's been some great benefits enabled by technology. So one key thing is now people can get from one side of Timaru to the other without necessarily needing to transfer, because on the old fixed route service, some routes would take you the whole way, but for other destinations like the hospital, you might need to transfer. As I mentioned before, there's 5 times more stop locations than with the traditional fixed route service. And it's also proven to be very reliable, with most pickups happening within 20 seconds of the communicated time. And of course, the great thing about technology is that you can continue to innovate. So improvements have continually been able to be made during the trial period. There's been some great customer feedback as well. Very, very positive response from the community, with 93% of users feeling that it's a better service than the traditional forms of public transport, the fixed routes that were there beforehand. 92% of users feeling that it has made it easier for them to use public transport. And 95% of the users rating their rides as 4 stars or more. Of course, with any project like this, you learn a lot of lessons along the way. So these are some of the key ones that have been learned through this trial. It's really important to work out what solution might best fit the problem that you're trying to solve. It's not one size fits all. And a lot of work was done before launching the trial in Timaru. Peak school demand cannot be easily accommodated by an on-demand service. So in Timaru, as I mentioned before, there has been some fixed route services left in place to cater for that. As I said at the outset, partnerships are really, really important. And a lot of the success in this project has been down to the 5 key partners I mentioned at the start. This customer-centric nature of the service has been really key in its success. And a lot of effort has been put into that by the Environment Canterbury team. And indeed, there's been a lot of hard work overall. Providing a more accessible service is expensive and has come at a cost. It is more expensive than the previous fixed route services. It has led to some patronage growth, and that has been great in a COVID situation. The trial is continuing at the moment, and we're just working through some stuff at the moment as to what the next steps will be. So thanks so much for your time, and now happy to take any questions. Now I can see the Q&A. Shall I just jump into that now that I can?
Yep, absolutely.
So the first one from Oliver. Do you have any other councils or transport providers who are interested in on-demand public transport? Yeah, that's a great question. So Auckland had a trial initially in the Devonport area of an on-demand public transport solution. And I believe that Auckland Transport are working on another trial service in South Auckland, which is likely to kick off before too long. Other regions around the country have been interested in on-demand as well. And at Environment Canterbury, we always saw this as a trial for other similar sized towns around the country, rather than just something specifically for Canterbury. So I know that in the Hawke's Bay, there has been quite a bit of interest in starting up some services there. And in Waikato, there's going to be an on-demand service starting quite soon, which is actually a little bit different. It's focused on nighttime travel. So prior to COVID, they had in place a night bus service, and the on-demand solution will replace the night bus service, which hasn't actually started up again after COVID, but it's, in their view, a better way of being able to provide that service in the future. Okay, so Bruce from ATOC. The service can be used in Auckland after peaks and off peak when there is not many passengers. Is this possible to be tried? Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, Bruce. So obviously with on-demand, you need a different kind of fleet to what you'd need for a fixed route service. So one challenge, I guess, when we're thinking about peak versus off-peak, is if you're not using the vehicles in the peak, you're needing a second fleet entirely. So that could be a bit of a challenge if you're looking at a place where you need a really big peak fleet, buying that second fleet for off-peak times. Perhaps instead, the situation I mentioned before with Auckland Transport trialling something in South Auckland, which I believe will be all day, might be the best first steps. Juliet Stantec. What percentage of people are using the app compared to the phone booking service? I don't have the exact number on me, sorry, Julie, but I do know the vast majority are using the app. Carlos, how do fares compare to the previous system? Is it more expensive for users? So it is a little bit more expensive. Timaru has very good value fares to start with. So if I recall correctly, the previous fare was $1.65 if you're using your Metro card, which is the smart card in Timaru. The launch fare for My Way was $2, and then that was increased during the trial period to $2.50. So that's still a really good value fare, perhaps compared to what you might be used to in places like Auckland and Wellington using public transport. When the fare went up, it didn't result in a major decline in usage. So part of the testing, I guess, has been in the elasticity of fare levels. So it's been really good to see that people value the product and were prepared to continue using it when the price increased.
Ed, we've got lots of questions coming in, which is fantastic, lots of engagement, but I'm going to let you take one more question and then we'll move on to the next presenter.
Great. All right, I'm just doing them in the order received. So Helen's question was next. You have good data from users. Any attempts to collect data from non-users? Yes, there have been some surveys that have covered non-users as well. The research has shown that there's a good number of the users who weren't previously public transport users. So that's really heartening to see that the service has attracted new people in. Would have been great if COVID hadn't happened, because then you would have had that true baseline of how much you're growing at compared to the previous service. Of course, COVID probably meant some people stopped using public transport for other reasons. But it has been really useful to be able to get research from the community as a whole, as well as the users. All right, hey, thanks everyone. Sorry we haven't had time to answer all of the questions that were asked. Please drop me a line. You're very welcome to, and happy to answer anything further.
That's great. Thank you for that offer, Ed. If anyone would like to get a question to Ed and they don't have his email address, I'm sure he's not that difficult to find, but you can pass your questions through me as well, and I'll collate some of those questions for you, Ed. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing. It's great to see you've had a great success with the trial, some really positive outcomes there. So our next speaker today is Jane Jujnuovich from Kainga, and she's Director of Grays Avenue. I will pass the controls to you now, Jane, and it looks like we're just a little bit of delay while you're flicking through the slides there, so please just be patient, everybody.
Thanks, Simon. And Ed, that sounds amazing. So you're a hard act to follow. So, yeah, kia ora koutou. I am Jane Jujnuovich. I am Director of 139 Grays Avenue for Kainga Ora, right, as Simon says, right in central Auckland. So, in terms of our sustainability journey, we're fairly early on at Kainga Ora. So we've got a program team of 10 currently working in this space. Over the last 12 months, we've developed a sustainability strategy and a framework. You can see the framework here. And the establishment of the sustainability program recognises the significant impact that Kainga Ora activities and operations have on the environment and our communities that we work in. So we've made a commitment to do things differently and feel that by improving our environmental performance, we can also achieve a number of benefits for our customers and our communities. Also, we are one of the largest developers in Aotearoa, so we have an important role in sustainability within the construction sector, which we obviously want to improve in as well. So this slide just sort of goes through the 5 areas. These are our 5 main focus areas where we think we can make the most impact. So climate change mitigation, using our resources efficiently, sustainable transport, hence why we're here today, enhancing nature and climate change adaptation. So today I'm here to talk about this beautiful building behind me and on the screen. So this is a redevelopment that I'm director of right in the centre of Auckland, off Aotea Square. We've had a real focus in this project around innovation, improving wellbeing, and around sustainability. And we've tried to run with that throughout the whole program. There's 276 apartments that we're building. 200 of those will be public homes and 76 are market rentals. This is the first single site supported housing building in Aotearoa, so there'll be 24/7 support services on site, and we'll be targeting people that are currently part of the rough sleeping community as some of the people that will move into this building. There's a mix of homes from studios to 2 beds. 60% of the units are accessible or universally designed, and the building is Homestar 7 designed. And you can sort of see from the design at the bottom, we have 3,000 square metres of shared communal retail space below the residential towers. And just as a note, we were the first Kainga Ora redevelopment to have social procurement outcomes written into our build contract. And the other important design factor for what I'm talking about today is we made a decision really early on that we were going to provide no customer parking for these 276 apartments. A delay has hit. Are you able to move it on, Simon?
I can.
There we go, thank you. So what was our ambition and why did we choose not to have car parks? So there was the obvious stuff. We want to reduce congestion in the city, we want to reduce emissions, and we want to provide our customers with access to alternative transport solutions. In terms of our customer cars, generally they are their largest asset. However, they depreciate over time. They're generally older cars that our customer owns, hard to keep running. They cost a lot of money and they're obviously high in emissions. So we're wanting to reduce costs for our customers. In terms of the location of Grays, it's centrally located. If you're going to try having no car parking at a Kainga Ora redevelopment, this is where you do it. We're right in the centre of the city. This new CRL will have stations at either end of the road, and there's buses that run down and you're walking distance to the centre of the city. So we didn't believe that parking was required because it's such a great location. And so to help support that decision, our solution was that we would look to provide on-site shared and accessible transport options for our customers to use, and that includes bike, car, scooter. We're even looking at trikes to enable people to get around. Simon, maybe can you move on again?
There you go.
Thank you. So moving to alternative transport options is not a thing that many people necessarily think of, and our customers were the same. Through the redevelopment and through the construction that we're currently underway with, we needed to remove existing car parks that were attached to a 50-unit apartment next door. And there was a lot of apprehension in the customers that lived there, that we were taking away their car parks. What were they going to do with their cars? How were they going to get around? And so we felt this gave us the perfect opportunity to trial alternatives with people that were already living in the area, and hence the City Hop pilot was found. And so to test our thinking, so what did we want to do? What was our motivation? We wanted to change behaviours and encourage adoption of alternative transport options. We wanted to be environmentally friendly because that's really important to us, but more importantly, we wanted to reduce costs for our customers. How do we set it up? So we got into agreement with City Hop, and they provided 3 cars and 3 car parks in a car park right next door to the existing apartments. Anyone could use the cars, but we promoted it within our customer base. We had sign-up days, we had letters going out, we had information going out, and we really promoted the use of it. Just noting, as with Ed, we undertook this during COVID-19 travel restrictions, so we're unsure what impact that had on the outcomes, but in terms of the results, we had 214 people participated from that Grays Ave location, and that was 2,496 car share journeys. 96 of those were first-time users, and because of privacy, we don't have a clear number of how many of those customers were ours. However, we do have anecdotal feedback from our customers that some of them did use it, and we've also had some really lovely anecdotal feedback that people have really thought about different ways to use transport since we put this trial in place and since we removed those car parks. And so initiatives to enable change. So what are we doing? We're providing a choice of transport solutions. To support the options we're going to provide, we're providing technology and digital platforms. So I've got a team developing a wellbeing app that will be available for everyone in the building and around the community, and we're wanting to link that to transport, so make it easy. We are also going to provide a whole lot of on-site support for customers who've never used it. So we've got staff on site 24/7 in this building, and we will be supporting people for them to learn to use the apps and to use the service and promoting it through those daily engagements. We're also looking at other ways that we can provide transport for people. So we're talking to some supermarkets around combined grocery deliveries for ease of access and cost reduction for people. And we're obviously looking at a whole lot of different ways to promote alternative transport. And to enable participation and uptake through the community, we're setting up peer groups that can help train people, and we're going to have a whole lot of community development opportunities that we can promote these alternative transport options and the support that people can get for them. And I think the most important thing to enable change is I have a very passionate team who want to enable this change and are willing to do whatever it takes to get that over the line. So that's me. I'm happy to take questions. Will I just go to Q&A down here?
Yeah,
oh, yeah, you go.
Yeah, that's right. I've got them here. If you'd like me to read the questions to you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay,
cool. Let's see. I think this is where your questions start. So Chris Rapson, I think that's Auckland Transport. Besides congestion and providing mobility to those who can't drive, one of the main motivations for public transport is to reduce emissions. So I need you guys, when you're posing questions, please let us know who you're posing the question to. I'll find one for Jane. That was another one for Ed. Jane, this is from Oliver Krollman. Jane, you mentioned trikes. Are these tricycles similar to bicycles, and are they electric?
Yes, my understanding is they are electric. Gray's Ave is a very steep street, so I can't see people riding low level trikes up there. So yes, electric trikes. I don't think they're coming out of Auckland. My team are working on it, but I think they found somewhere outside of Auckland that will do electric trikes.
Question from Helen Fitt, University of Lincoln, and actually an ITS New Zealand director as well. Can you tell us a bit more about the promotions you've done to encourage clients to use this scheme? I know you did touch on that a little bit. Do you want to expand on that for us?
Sure. So, so we had sign-up days where we invited people and we set up a little stall next to the cars to promote it. We had a whole lot of those planned, and then COVID put the kibosh on that, unfortunately. But we sent out information packs. We did some vouchers for people to promote City Hop and to encourage people to use it. And I think one of the learnings from this was that we needed to do more. I mean, COVID, yes, made it a difficult process, but once we have the car share on site, I think we'll be wanting to do a lot of contact, because for our customers, I think it was quite a big change for them. And so, yeah, if I learnt anything out of it, I think we need to have constant contact and ways that we can interact with people on a pretty constant basis while they start up.
Great. Ranjam Pant, I think that's Auckland University. Just checking that the cars were all electric cars that you used in this one? Yep.
Yeah. And we'll have 3 car shares cars on site, and they'll be electric as well. So we've installed the chargers on site.
Cool. And a question from Simon Kingham. Simon's at University of Canterbury and also advisor to MOT. He's asking specifics, hopefully not an uncomfortable question. How much does it actually cost? If it's subsidised, who and how?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, Simon. So we had talked about whether we could subsidise it, and but we never managed to get that over the line for the trial. So our customers paid the same as other customers, but when we go to procure the longer term service, that will certainly be something that we'll be looking at, of ways that we can reduce the cost for our customers if they use these.
Cool. One last question here from Ben Carter at City Hop.
Hi, Ben.
Actually, it's Charlie from City Hop, so maybe he's logged in as Ben. They're watching together, perhaps. Did you survey users to measure if customers' active transport or public transport use changed over private car use?
No, we haven't done formal surveys, but I think that was probably a missed opportunity. I think it would have been quite good to do that. We've only got anecdotal feedback from people that we've talked to.
Cool. There's always learnings in trials like this, but really well done for giving it a go. I think we're going to wrap up the questions there. That's right, Jane. Did you have anything more you wanted to add before we move on?
No, thanks for having me.
Cool. No, lovely to have you. And please do stick around at the end. If you think of some questions for the other speakers, you're welcome to jump in there as well. Okay, so if we're moving on to Elizabeth Yeaman, who's MD at Retyna. And Liz, as I introduced her at the beginning, been around electric transport for a long time now and has a good understanding of what's going across New Zealand. She'll be touching on a number of interesting features of electric vehicles and electric charging, and talking a little about the electric ferry in Wellington, which she's been supporting as well. So I'm going to give control to Liz now, and hopefully it works. Liz, just let me know if you need me to flick the slides for you.
Thanks. Hi everybody, and I'm actually out at the boat building yard and I've just started some power tools up, so apologies if there's a bit of background noise there. I'll just see if I've got the slides working now. So the first thing to note, I think, is what the Climate Change Commission has been saying about us meeting our climate change targets. To have an even chance of limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees, we actually have to get New Zealand's transport emissions to zero by 2025 on a net basis. That's a big challenge. They've looked at various ways that that can be done, including, of course, they take into account big growth in walking, cycling, and public transport. But it's simply not possible to achieve that zero decarbonisation without the need for electric vehicles. Analysis done by the Climate Change Commission shows that sometime between 2030 and 2035, all new vehicles purchased in New Zealand or registered for the first time need to be electric in order to be on track. If we have a look at what's been happening recently, try to be patient here with the slide. We've seen the Clean Car Standard come in for New Zealand, which has incentivized electric vehicle uptake, and we're seeing some big changes as a result of that. But the big question a lot of people have is, where is all the electricity going to come from? These graphs here show some analysis of what the electricity demand will be if we have a high electric vehicle uptake. It's quite a significant growth in the dark blue at the very top of this graph. But when we look back maybe more than a decade ago, it's about the kind of rate of growth that we used to have in electricity demand. And it's steady, but it's a rate that is achievable. And when we look at where that electricity will come from, it's through, the majority of it is from wind generation with some new solar. New Zealand has really outstanding global electricity resources from wind generation. The black there is coal. We can see that disappearing in the future. The Huntly Power Station will not continue. The orange on the graph is gas. We're not seeing big growth in that. What we are seeing is huge growth in wind generation and solar happening. Won't be new hydro schemes, won't be much new geothermal. Wind and solar is where that's going to come from. We move on to the next slide. It's easy to think of Norway as a leading country in electric vehicles, but when we have a look around what other countries are doing, particularly in Europe, we're now seeing significant rates of EV uptake in other countries. Over half of all new vehicles sold in Iceland are electric. Sweden, it's 40%. If we look at somewhere that feels a little more familiar, in the UK in the first half of this year, 15% of all electric vehicles were sold. And I think last month it was something like 20%. So you can see around the world, particularly in Europe, we're starting to get significant amounts of electric vehicle uptake. Yes, there are incentives, but in the long term, the prices will come down. But what it does show is that when people have a choice and the upfront cost barrier is taken away a bit, people buy these cars and they use them and they like them. If we have a look next about what models are available, we kind of feel that there's a limited variety here. We are not yet seeing the range of models and the driving range that's possible. There are now somewhere between 350 and 400 different electric vehicle models available globally. And now the average driving range of those vehicles is at least 400 kilometers on a single charge. So we're seeing real changes and advances in the technology. And that's leading a number of countries and vehicle manufacturers to signal what I'm calling the end of the ICE age, which is the internal combustion engine age. This is petrol and diesel vehicles. So from 2025, South Korea and Norway will no longer allow petrol and diesel vehicles to be sold in their markets. And on the other side of the fence, a lot of vehicle manufacturers are saying that they are no longer going to sell electric vehicles, anything that isn't petrol and diesel vehicles, they are no longer going to sell petrol and diesel vehicles after those particular years. So the early ones on that 2025, Jaguar and Mercedes in Europe, will not be selling petrol or diesel vehicles anymore. Highlighted are the right-hand drive countries, which are like us. So we can see from 2030, the UK, Ireland and India will no longer allow petrol and diesel vehicles to be sold in those countries. 2035, 36 for Japan, 2040 for Singapore and Sri Lanka. And we're seeing some of the big global names, General Motors, Ford, Volkswagen, so on, no longer saying that they will be selling petrol or diesel vehicles from that year. If we have a little look at what the recent Clean Car Discount has been doing to EV uptake in New Zealand, this is the numbers of EVs in New Zealand. And if we have a look at the graph on the right, we can see monthly registrations have rocketed. So in the latest month, which is just gone, September, there were over 2,000 electric vehicles sold into New Zealand. That was over 10% of all new vehicles sold in New Zealand. So we can see that policy is making a big change in the right direction for where we need to go in order to meet our climate change targets. But of course, we need to not only just look at private EVs, we also need to look at public transport, and also public fast charging is a big part of the uptake. We already have a really good public fast charging network around New Zealand, which has been supported largely by private investment from ChargeNet, but also government investment as well to build that network. So we're very, very fortunate that there is already in place. That's a lot of countries would be envious of that kind of coverage. 95% of the state highway system already has a charger every 75 kilometres. If we have a look around what's happening in the forecast share of the sales, this is what's happening with different kinds of vehicles. And while passenger vehicles are taking off, I think people do not realise what has happened, the massive transition that has already happened globally for electric buses. Last year, half of all buses sold globally were electric, and that's predicted to continue to rise. Two-wheelers have also had a huge uptake in electric vehicles, again continuing to rise. What's being the slowest off the ground is trucks, but we'll have a little bit more about look at what's happening in the bus area. So we are now seeing about 700,000 electric buses on the roads globally by now, and the majority of those zero-emission buses are electric. Initially, there was quite a variety with some hydrogen, some plug-in hybrids, but pure electric buses are the way that is now dominating. And we're starting to see those electric buses come through in New Zealand. We're seeing them in a lot of city centres now. Just showing you some innovation that's been happening around this. The photo on the left is a long distance coach that operates a service between Warkworth and Auckland for commuters. It's a luxury coach with USB ports at every seat and seat belts, 100% electric, and runs that service several times a day between Warkworth and Auckland. And on the right there is the double-decker New Zealand-built electric bus that does ultra-fast charging with a pantograph scheme in Wellington. I think we might not see so much of the pantographs because the batteries are getting so good now that you can buy off the shelf easily today a bus that will do 400 kilometres on a single charge and then recharge overnight. And that's what most bus routes in New Zealand, you'd be struggling to find a bus route that does more than 400 kilometres a day. And that's continuing to improve. On the trucks, they've been much slower to take off. We're kind of in the 30 to 40,000 electric trucks on the road globally. Again, they've been dominated by battery electric vehicles. We're seeing some fuel cell vehicles come in, particularly for the very long, very heavy trucks. It'll be really interesting to see how that progresses over time. And we're seeing the first of those trucks on the road in New Zealand now. Let's try to move on to the next slide. They started off, waste management was one of the first companies to do that. If you work for a local government, it's an ideal way for rubbish where you actually, the quiet of operating in the morning is a real advantage. Supermarkets now have electric trucks for their delivery, and Fuso have brought in the e-canter, that's starting trials in the proposed zero emission area in the Queen Street Valley in central Auckland to show how it would be possible to keep deliveries going if that part of Auckland were to become a zero emissions area in the future. And just moving on to ferries, which is an area I've been working on. There's a number of projects. New Zealand is leading the way in the Southern Hemisphere for ferries. There's the Wellington ferry I'm about to show you, but the Inter-Islander is also planning and has started build of a plug-in hybrid replacement for the Inter-Islander, which is really exciting. If we move on, I can show you we have completed the electric ferry. It's undergoing sea trials in Wellington. Unfortunately, the video doesn't work too well over the webinar, but there's a link at the bottom. If you go to the East by West ferry site, you'll be able to watch a video of the sea trials that are happening right at the moment here in Wellington, with that ferry set to enter service within the next month or so. That's very exciting. Obviously, there's huge potential for electric ferries in Auckland, particularly given that the ferries that operate in Auckland use as much diesel as half of all the public transport buses do in Auckland. So a significant amount of fuel there to be displaced. There's some real changes coming in charging technology. We're looking at a proposed electric ferry service to Miramar from central Wellington as well, which would be really exciting. That's currently another project I'm working on at the moment. And that would mean that residents on the Miramar Peninsula, from the Miramar Peninsula to the CBD, would be a 7 to 8 minute journey, as opposed to going around on the land at peak time. It's probably at least 40 minutes, so massive time savings possible there. If we also look at what's happening on the charging, we're starting to see some really fast charging rates coming in new standards, truck that a truck could easily be recharged in the half-hour compulsory rest break that truck drivers have to have every 5.5 hours. And that would also allow ferries and aircraft to recharge. And on the aircraft side, we've seen Sounds Air in Wellington announce that they have ordered electric aircraft to operate on the Wellington to Nelson route. These are going to be 100% electric aircraft. They are going to come from 2026, and a number of those are ordered from Sounds Air. They're one of the first companies in the world to have put in an order for those. So some very exciting times happening in the transport electrification space. And we are going to see some real revolutionary stuff happening. And New Zealand is perfectly suited for this because of our exceptionally good renewable generation sources for electricity. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Liz. Fantastic. You covered so much there. I think you've given everybody a real understanding of what's going on here in New Zealand, but also some amazing stuff happening internationally. I was blown away there. Everybody knows about Norway, but just to see what else is happening out there is really impressive. And 50% of buses, amazing. Let's jump into some questions, shall we? Let's see. Okay, this is a question that I'm sure you've come across before. How do you intend to recycle EV batteries? I'm sure it's not you that has to come up with that solution, but you'll know what's going on out there, I'm sure, Liz.
Yes, and it's actually a question I like to get, because the thing about the electric vehicles is that everything you need to run that vehicle is still there on the ground at the end of it. It hasn't all been burnt and put up into the air. So the average car over its lifetime would use somewhere around 20 tons of fuel, all of which goes up into the air. An electric battery might weigh 500 kilograms and it's still there at the end of the vehicle life. And it's still got valuable materials in it that haven't been used, and so they are available to be recycled. Electric batteries have valuable materials in them. They can be recycled. And in fact, New Zealand is got a product stewardship scheme coming into place. It's been developed between industry and the Ministry for the Environment. And that will be coming in. It'll mean that every battery that enters New Zealand will have a deposit paid on it that will go to ensure that that battery is recovered and recycled at the end of its life.
I don't know if you can answer this one, Liz. If you can't, we'll move on quickly. A question from Martin Noki. How is the purchase of Ritchie's buses by the US's KKR likely to impact their shift from diesel to EV and HV?
Well, given that Auckland Transport have already stated that it will not fund any new diesel buses in Auckland from the 31st of July 2021, i.e. that is a date in the past. So you already cannot put a new diesel bus onto the road in Auckland. The government, Waka Katahi, has said that they will no longer fund diesel buses from 2025. So as long as Ritchie's buses keep operating here, they are likely to keep up with local policy, and local policy is demanding that public transport buses will convert to EV or other zero emission, but it's very much likely to be EV.
Cool. I've got two questions here on a similar topic. One is from Bruce Kassir and the other one from Doug Wilson at University of Auckland, who you may know. Bruce is a traffic engineer at ATOC. He asks, I'll quickly run through both questions and see if there's any difference in the way they've worded them. What is the future of charging methods? Will New Zealand consider such as inductive charging roads or using overhead lines? And Doug says, interested in your thoughts on the market for wireless inductive charging demand that could reduce battery weight versus conductive fast charging.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be really interesting with the developments that's happening with charging speeds. So one of the reasons that people have been looking at inductive charging on roads or overhead lines is to allow to extend the driving range of those vehicles. But we're now seeing driving ranges of cars, around 600, 700, 800 kilometers starting to come in. You will need to stop and rest for safety reasons in those journeys, and they are now getting charging speeds coming in the future that are likely to do that within a good rest break. Overhead lines, again, it's the same for buses. You're already seeing the need for catenary charging at bus stops to go, because you could do 400 kilometers on a single bus charge. Inductive charging of roads is very expensive. You've got a lot of wear. It's a lot of expensive kit under there. You may see some inductive charging, but it might be, for example, at places like taxi stops and truck loading zones, where you might be able to extend those high mileage vehicles, the daily driving range of those, and keeping the battery size down, particularly for goods vehicles where you want to do some loading. But I think that whereas a few years ago we might be looking really strongly at inductive charging, I think that there will be some challenges ahead just because of the way that the big changes in charging speeds are going. Factors of 20 times faster than the fastest charging we're seeing at the moment.
Can I just pick up on one point that Doug there, I think, is looking to, which is the battery weight question. And I guess the impact on roads will be of interest to a number of people listening today as well. Do you know much of that?
Yes, I mean there are some impact changes at the moment. I mean, batteries are adding some more weight, but as we're seeing vehicles designed from the bottom up to be electric, we're seeing a greater spread of that weight, maybe some reductions in weight in other areas. So particularly for the really heavy vehicles like buses and trucks and so on, it will be really interesting to see whether or not it would be more cost effective just to do a little more strength in those roads, particularly on the heavy bus routes, rather than do induction charging where they're already going to be heavily used routes, and then there's a lot of infrastructure under that road that will be costly to maintain.
Great. I'm going to wrap up here with one final question from me. Sorry, we have got one more come in. Okay, but I'll allow this one, and then I've got one more question which nobody else has answered, and hopefully you can answer that too. One of the issues for personal EVs in New Zealand is not having the off-street parking with access to charging. How are we going to be overcoming that?
Well, I've had an EV for 3 years and I don't have any access to off-street parking. I think we are going to see more chargers go in cities. In fact, the most heavily used chargers tend to be the ones where people live. I think we are going to see those people who have to park on the street possibly using more fast charging in the future in order to meet that demand, or some community chargers. There's a community charger in my street that I use. But certainly fast charging and more of it and more spread through communities, so it's a short distance away. Also having a bigger batteries in cars, if you're looking at 400 kilometers, and most people drive only 30 kilometers a day, it means that really just once a week is the only time that you need to charge, rather than the smaller batteries which need charging or topping up, every night or every other night. The bigger batteries will make a difference there as well.
Cool. So my question, and hopefully you can answer it, seeing as we're here today listening about innovation, going back to the East by West ferry in particular, what's next for them?
They are looking at new ferry projects. So the Miramar Airport service is one that I'm working on at the moment, and Oricon are assisting us with that. That would look at running the CBD out to Miramar Wharf at the end of the airport runway with a connecting electric shuttle bus through to the airport. That would be a really exciting innovation. We'd be looking at a service that ran every 15 minutes at peak times, and massive time travel savings and convenience for an electric ferry operating there. So that's what we'd really like to be our next project.
Okay, super duper. Thanks, Liz. I know you did touch on that in your presentation as well. Thank you so much. As I say, well-rounded presentation there, covering a lot of the EV scene here in New Zealand. And just like with our other presenters, if you've got more questions for Liz, feel free to bring those through to me or contact Liz direct. I'm sure she'll be happy to help you. Moving on, we have Mahmood Hikmet, Dr. Mahmood Hikmet from Ohmio, who's going to be talking to us on the main, I think, about their autonomous shuttle, which if you haven't heard of by now, you've probably been living under a rock. But let's hear more about what's the latest.
Thanks so much, Simon. Hi, everyone. As Simon said, I'm Dr. Mahmood Hikmet, the Head of Research and Development at Ohmio and HMI. My contact details are on the slide if anyone wants to reach out. We try to engage with as many New Zealand businesses and companies and organizations as we can. I know that we're doing a lot of stuff that other people aren't, so we'd like to share that knowledge as much as we can. My Twitter's on there as well. I don't quite have a TikTok yet, but once that's there, I'll update the slide and make sure it's there. But if you don't know who Ohmio is, we arose from HMI Technologies. HMI, there we go. HMI, for those who don't know, is an ITS manufacturer dealing mostly with roadside infrastructure, from electronic road signs, VMSs, to sensors, and basically anything that goes on the side of the road to help with transport operators increase road usage without building more roads, essentially. In 2015, we had sort of an introspective look at ourselves and said, all right, in 20 years from now, are we still going to be building the same sorts of products? Are things going to still look the same? We saw that our product, essentially, the VMSs specifically, are a way for the transport operator to communicate with the driver of a vehicle. But when we have autonomous vehicles, are we still going to be using light up letters on a board in order to send messages through? Our inclination was no, probably not. We'd use some sort of V2X communication, but being engineers, we wanted to get our hands dirty and understand that connection. And we set about sorting the first few trials of autonomous shuttles in New Zealand and Australia. We were running 3 at the time, one in Christchurch Airport, one in Melbourne at La Trobe University, and the other at Sydney Olympic Park. And what we found was that the industry was focused very much on delivering a product as opposed to integrating the vehicle into the ecosystem of a cooperative sort of ITS approach. Everyone was saying, if you want an autonomous shuttle or you want autonomous mobility, you buy an autonomous shuttle and there you go, you've got it. And we didn't really like that approach very much. We thought that you'd get a lot more out of the vehicles are an important part, but equally the infrastructure is important. What charging stations you need, how do you balance demand between different areas based on the time of day, and how do you communicate with traffic lights? Can you make those sorts of connections better and smarter? We couldn't find anyone in the industry really that thought that way. They were all focused on their own sort of silo product being released. So that's why we set about building our own vehicle. And in 2017, Simon, I'm not able to connect. Can I go to the next? There we go. Ah, no, I've gone too many slides forward. There we go. Let's go back a couple. You'd think I'd know how to use PowerPoint by now. In May of 2017, we set about building our first vehicle. If you're a mechanical engineer, close your ears, but we basically said, let's not deal with the mechanical challenges to begin with. Let's build an autonomous vehicle first, because the autonomous part of the equation was more interesting to us at the beginning. People have built vehicles before. Very few have made those vehicles drive by themselves. And then by September of that same year, we managed to demonstrate the first autonomous shuttles that we made, also based on golf carts with some shells on top, but they demonstrated our proof of concepts of platooning, as well as being able to interact with the infrastructure around us. And this was demonstrated in Christchurch, outside the Christchurch Art Gallery in September. Then in March of 2019, you may recognize this vehicle. This was the Sparks 5G driverless car that they used as part of their demonstration. Very important step for learning for me from this is that people saw it as a very angry looking car. The face at the front was not very friendly looking, and it sort of looks like a face. The news called it Darth Vader's car, which is funny in retrospect, but it goes to show how I think that was the first insight really we had at how this interaction with humans is really, really important. And that's become much more central to the way we do things now. You need to think about how people are going to interact with your technology. And if there's a component on there that people can see as an unfriendly face, that's something you need to take care of, even though that sounds a little bit silly in the design phase. This is something that's going to impact the acceptability and uptake of this technology. It needs to be able to be presented in the right way to people. In June of 2019, we delivered our vehicle to the first commercial sale to Christchurch Airport. This is also the world's largest 3D printed autonomous shuttle. Long story into the 3D printed vehicle, full stop, but long story, I won't get into it too much, but we ended up delivering the vehicle that we wanted a couple years prior, which is able to communicate and interact with different sorts of technology from different vendors and infrastructure. In June of 2020, we started our deliveries to Korea. We now have 3 vehicles over in Korea, and you might recognize this as being in the midst of the COVID lockdowns and us not being able to travel. So we commissioned a vehicle remotely to Korea without needing to travel there, which was a huge engineering challenge. We had to build all sorts of simulators and emulators within New Zealand so that we could work from home while developing an autonomous shuttle that then gets pushed into testing over in Korea. But we managed to get that over the line, which was really cool. In October 2020, we demonstrated at Pirata Rise, being able to show that these vehicles can work in sort of these developments for first last mile transportation, so that, say, a person living in Pirata Rise can go and take one of these vehicles on a bus, go take one of these vehicles instead of using a park and ride to the local train station and not need to rely on a car. Next page would be in June of 2021. So this year we received our driver's license for Korea. So we've passed the regulatory test over in Korea, and we've got our number plate here. So we can legally drive on the roads over there. We're the only autonomous shuttle provider who's managed to pass their new testing, which is something we're really proud of. A New Zealand company exporting autonomous vehicles to Korea is sort of like buying cheese from there to New Zealand, buying Korean cheese in New Zealand. It's not the way we usually think of that exchange, but we're really, really proud to be part of that. This is one of the tests that we had to do as part of that demonstration, where the vehicle is traveling down a road and another vehicle pulls out in front of it unexpectedly. Ideally, the result of this is that the shuttle does not crash into the vehicle. It slows down its trajectory and moves on, and it did that, which was really cool. And we did a series. There was 100 of these tests that we had to pass as part of our demonstration. Moving on next. In August 2021, so a couple months ago, we got a $1.5 million federal grant to demonstrate 5G and how we can use that with autonomous shuttles in order to help the elderly and disabled persons. We're in the planning phases of that now, which is something we're really excited about. If you tuned into 7 Sharp on Tuesday, you would have seen the Winton's announcement of Sunfield, a carless suburb that they're building near Ardmore in South Auckland. They're utilizing what they're calling the Sunbus to go around their Sunfield loop, which is this loop that goes around the development. Their idea is for no one living within Sunfield to need to purchase a private car, which is pretty bold. And they will use these vehicles to get around and go to the nearest train station or go to the on-demand car yard in order to get a vehicle to take them on a trip. I'll answer questions on that if anyone has any. So some of the learnings that we got over the last little while. The first would be that the people's outlook change. People's outlook, needs, and perceptions change once they get hands-on experience. Autonomous shuttles and autonomous vehicles in general are something very new, and there's a lot of startups that operate in the same space. And when startups are looking for funding, etc., you tend to get hype mixed in with what engineering reality actually is. And so you get all these mixed perceptions that people have. And people, when I say people, it's very general, and it's someone across every single layer of society, from the normal public to even regulators and policymakers. These people need hands-on experience with these vehicles. You're not going to be able to make decisions around autonomous vehicles by sitting in a boardroom and not actually interacting with them, because it's very difficult to sanitize and work through what is real, what is not, what do you actually need to worry about and what you don't. In the meantime, a lot of the languages that gets used in the space is extremely aspirational. So it takes a bit to develop a filter for that. And the best way to do that is hands-on experience. Next, top-down vision is one of the best ways to ensure success. We've been approached by many, many people. I still get a lot of emails from people at all layers of an organization. That puts us in a very sort of privileged position where we can choose our partners. We can be quite picky with who we choose as our partners. We found that while it's great that people from the bottom layers of the company working their way up to management try to bring about better ways of doing things, without a top-down vision from the organization that we're speaking with, whether it's a council, a government, or just a private business, then it's going to be it just takes one no on that ascent to the decision maker to really throw a spanner in the works. So if we're looking for autonomous shuttles and a partner to help us on that journey, to work with us on that journey, we need a top-down vision that goes into that organization. Another thing that's pretty uncomfortable, especially when you're speaking with public organizations, is that it's okay to not have all the answers right away. This is a new technology, and new technology can bring about very new ways of doing things and solving new answers to these problems. But a lot of the time, you don't know what you don't know. And the best way to figure that out is by actually doing it and refining it and taking this iterative design approach where you're constantly changing and upgrading what you're doing in order to figure out what's best for that specific rollout. It's something that's not quite comfortable, especially when you're coming into the civil engineering or mechanical engineering space, etc., where you've got this very long project design phase and then you execute it. This is more of a computer and software engineering design paradigm where you're rapidly iterating over and finding out how best to frame your solution. It's a new way of doing things, and I guess it's a culture clash between different engineering disciplines, but this is something that we really try to stress with our partners. Next, we need to find the quickest way to failure. Failure is usually seen as a bad word when you're rolling out a new project or trying something new, but for us, when we're developing software or technology, the sooner we can fail at something, the better, because it means that we've spent less money in engineering work on that. But failure is actually an opportunity that you get, which tells you, one, how to not do something, or two, whether you should bother with that thing, or you figure out sort of iteratively the best way to end up doing something. So this sort of failure is okay paradigm, it's actually a good thing, is something that isn't commonly found in all partners that we have. So this is something that I'd say is one of the things to try to get your head around in order to, if you're working with new technology. I think that's the end of it. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. I'll hand it over to Simon. I'm sure there's some questions that have come in.
Sorry, just unmuting myself there. I haven't fallen asleep. That was brilliant, Mahmood. Thank you very much for sharing both your achievements and the latest news and some of your learnings there. Let's jump into some of the questions as always. Bruce Cassier from ATOC, has this autonomous vehicle introduced to bus on demand in the Timaru project? Trying to read that one actually.
It's not, so we don't have any active sort of publicly accessible projects in New Zealand at the moment. The most public one we've got at the moment is over in Korea. We do have the Winton project that we just talked about as well, has quite a big timeline on it, but it's something that we're working on with them in order to do that first and last and only mile of transportation. So we're looking at, when we're looking at these vehicles, the best place for autonomous shuttles, they're relatively low speed. They go about the top speed of an e-bike or a 30 kilometers per hour is the international standard that's been released from ISO. So they're not really made for replacing mass transit or moving people across the city. They're there to take care of first and last mile and only mile. So if you've got a closed campus or you're going from your house to the local school, you take this bus the whole journey. But generally they're there to get you from your house to the local mass transit station, like a train station or a bus stop, so that the public transport can then focus on mass transit, high patronage sort of routes, and not need to send buses out into the suburbs. This would take over that. And this ends up, there's no silver bullet when it comes to public transport, what's more convenient for one person than another. Some people may like to walk, some would cycle, some would take e-scooters, some like park and rides. These autonomous shuttle give another option for getting over that first and last mile of transportation. And so it allows you to essentially get door-to-door access to the public transport network without needing to get into your own private car.
Cool. I've got a couple more questions here for you. One's a kind of an operational one, which I'm sure you'll be happy to answer, from Ranjan Pant. How does it behave with road obstacles? I guess now you've got some experience on the road in Korea. Does it navigate to another lane, or does it just stop, or what does it do in that kind of scenario?
Right. So in Korea, we've implemented lane change algorithms that allow us to change lanes depending on what's in front of us, etc. But that's generally not the approach that we take when we're speaking with partners. At the moment, we operate the vehicle like an autonomous tram that runs on virtual tracks. And just like how you wouldn't expect a tram to change lanes out of the steel tracks that are in the ground, these can be seen as a very similar way. The reason for this is not an engineering reason. So we've got the technology in order to go around obstacles. The reason for this is that usually when we're dealing with organizations, it's their first approach and their first time dealing with technology like this. So rather than getting caught up on ethical problems like the trolley problem or something like that and having to go down long discussions with that, we just have the vehicle just stops if anything gets in the way. We prioritize safety over efficiency, and then those sorts of problems can be figured out in the later parts of that deployment as we figure out what's better for that specific jurisdiction. So yes, we can do that, but it also depends on what it is that the operator is looking for.
Cool. One final very quick question, I'm sure. Sam Dunshay from Waka Katahi asks, how big was your team when you developed the original golf cart?
The team sort of grew and shrunk as it was going on. The original golf cart was developed by 5 people. The team grew. I think the largest we got to was about 20-ish people developing for the autonomous shuttle, and now we're back down to between 10 and 15 people that are working on the vehicle. So it's it's a pretty small team, all things considered. But the reason that that we're able to have a small team and still tackle this problem is by technically limiting the scope. We're not trying to solve the complex, the vehicle works in absolutely every location sort of level 5 problem. We're saying that the vehicle works on pre-plotted tracks, and we choose a subset of those tracks. So you might go left instead of right at a certain junction, but both have been plotted out in order to serve that demand. That's a much simpler technical problem to solve, but it also allows us to completely transform the way people get around and transport themselves. So yeah, you don't need level 5 in order to do this sort of stuff.
That's another conversation. Excellent, Mahmood. Thank you so much for your time. And
Cheers,
we're going to move on to hear from Scott Hammond, ITS manager at CSL Infrastructure. They've got some exciting projects that I know I'm excited about for personal reasons, but also some particularly cool innovations that they're able to shed some light on working in Auckland on transit lane enforcement. So I'll hand over to Scott. And Scott, yeah, let's take it away.
Cheers, Simon. Kia ora koutou, ko Scott toko ingoa, KCS Oho, e mahi ana. Welcome, guys, and thanks to our other speakers. Some real interesting stuff there within our industry. In some respects, I think I need to work on my intro for you, Simon, because there's some very clever people out there. Look, CSLI has been around for a little while, predominantly brought about through traffic signals, and we've grown a bit since then, and we'd now be recognised as one of the largest ITS specialists in Auckland. We have a presence in the Bay of Plenty in Tauranga, Whangarei, and we're doing some stuff in Wellington. So yeah, we're getting quite well known, and we're really enjoying the space. So I got asked to share some of the work that we've been doing, predominantly some work with Auckland Transport around the transit lane enforcement. And I will touch on a bit of the stuff we were doing and some of the other T-Techs around accessibility and our partnerships with the Blind Low Vision New Zealand.
So if you try and take control again, Scott, that's my end. I've just usurped you, so you can take it back again by clicking on the screen, I think.
Sure. Should,
There you go.
Cool. So I guess the CSL believes that a successful way to innovate and develop is to start overcoming some of the trust issues that we have to cooperate in this marketplace. And it ultimately can lead to some better outcomes. Our collaborations with Auckland Transport has been some proof of this and has been highly successful in some development. So we took a look at the transit lane enforcement and why this may be needed. We all know Auckland is known as the largest car park, and the traffic is a public enemy number one. So it's a good place to start. We also understand that to be successful, we need to start people carpooling, and we need to look at public transport as some options. We can see in here that 90% of car commuters drive in single occupancy vehicles. So it's a lot of automobiles out there with one person in them. We have 8% take up of public transport. So the need to increase public transport can significantly reduce the amount of cars we have on our roads. So our journey started in 2018 with some market research. Auckland Transport made a decision to develop their own computer vision platform and engage with CSLI to work together to provide a solution. This was some time coming, and developed our first prototype and went live into the Albany Auckland district in January 2001. So what you see here is the first TLE or transit lane enforcement install in Auckland with a customized designed pole, maximum pole, to hold a rugged TLE Mark 1 unit, which is removable and can be transported and planted on another pole, which becomes a nice mobile unit. It has multiple CCTV, radars, strobes, and in the early installs, the TLE design was kind of, as you see in the box there, has been upgraded to what we call a Mark II. And I guess as we get further and further into development, we're starting to get more efficient with the models and how they're put together and what we can put out on the roads. Just waiting for the slide to come through here. So the ATBT team done a pretty amazing job within their computer vision platform, and they can accept data from the field analysis and processes and auto package into evidential workflows for validating by the AT wardens. So it's really taking what was a very manual process into a full automated process, which then is validated and can be sent out via tickets to enhance the enforcement and ultimately get proactive response to using the TLE lanes appropriately. I'm just going to, a slide should come up soon where we can actually have a look at the video imaging from our site in Albany. If I can push play on here. So what we're seeing is the actual footage, and we will see a white van come down, which will be our vehicle of interest here. And we'll capture that vehicle through multiple CCTV. And then utilizing the technology within the TLE Mark II unit or Mark 1 unit, we'll capture various images to send to the computer vision team. So that's our overview. So we can ensure the vehicle's been in that lane for a set period of time. And as a vehicle comes into shot, we can collect number plate and we can take some series of snapshots, which then illuminated through the vehicle. And we can clearly see one driver. We can look through tints at the back and clearly see there's only tools in the back of that van. And therefore these images will be analyzed by the computer vision team and can be wrapped up into an evidential package and sent off. So really nice, clear images. So I guess what we're looking at here is some of the, let's get past that slide, some of the hurdles. Here we see Technical Manager Mike Little here with some of our first trials to get through tints, starting in the workshop with a pair of heavily tinted sunglasses. You can see on the right-hand side how some of our technology within this unit, we can see directly through these sunglasses to see closed eyes and anything on the other side. So it's one of the biggest hurdles that people have been having around seeing through vehicles. One of the other hurdles is the sun glare within, so you've got dusk dawn and generally some sites where you want this sort of technology has direct sunlight on the car windscreen. So the image on the left here is the same image on the right, but with our technology. And you can clearly see that there's a person in the passenger seat there the whole time. So we've been able to eliminate that sun glare off windscreens and see through these vehicles. Right. The computer vision team have some other hurdles. Is a dog classified as an occupant? And how does our system recognize that that's a dog and not a person? So we've picked up some very interesting images. And here's an image a while back when the T3 lanes first started coming about, where you may get people using dummies to sneak down the TLE lanes. So our computer vision team have got a bit of work, and the system and the platform has to be able to differentiate to fully automate and get some really clear packages sent off. So what are our benefits and risks? So I guess what we're doing is we're taking a look at what was a manual operation here versus automatic. And we're expanding the TLE units currently to possibly do other applications like distracted driver. But for now, we're in comparisons for the vehicle occupancy. And the wardens here have huge live traffic risk. Working in the bad weather, there's a lot of damage that's caused to heavily expensive cameras. And I think one of the worst ones is that these guys working on the side of the road, they do get a lot of abuse, and even to the point of physical assaults and injuries to our wardens. So using this automated response and having a unit on the side of the road can eliminate that. Some of the other benefits there is we've got a lot of time saving. A warden can only be in one place at one time. Our system can be deployed anywhere and be operational 24/7 or in the allocated transit lane times. And it's also on average taking about 5 minutes for an entire process. So it really does help and can automate this. I'm moving quite quickly because I'm aware of your time, Simon. So like I said, some other applications would be distracted drivers, and they do have a considerable impact on our roads. We can see in these pictures here, there's every road death consists of 4.54 million to taxpayers. So, yeah, and we have seen them gradually increasing over the recent times. And so using technology for seatbelt wearing and mobile phone detection can be a great way to serve as a deterrent for that kind of behavior and ultimately save government's money. So I just thought I'd also just finish with a brief around what CSL's been doing in the accessibility space. We partnered back in 2018. CSL went and explored ways to contribute to accessibility in the ITS industry. Our journey started looking first at beacon technology, and that's when I met Thomas Bryan was Blind Foundation at the time, now Blind Low Vision New Zealand. And we looked at some of the hurdles that their members face around our roading and our public transport. And at that time, we also connected with Blind Square, which is one of the largest blind applications in the world, and has been considerably seen a lot of growth within Australia recently as well. And this was used a few years back in Wellington as a sort of trial, and it had slowly fallen away. So from here, we sort of stemmed a good partnership between the two of them, and we started looking at some trials in and around Auckland, and saw some opportunities there to also start developing some new technology and getting into a bit of innovation around the space. By December this year, we should be looking at a new live trial for an improved smart beacon that we've had running down on Auckland's Horsley Street, which we've deemed a Ruru, which will be a Bluetooth connected device and has the ability to connect users to infrastructure, can utilize sound on board, can help navigate, can help operate pedestrian crossings, can help open pushed exit doors, and could all be done via an application or a Bluetooth fob. So the slide we're seeing here is some of the original trials that Auckland Transport undertook with blind low vision and utilising our Bluetooth beacons through the Newmarket train station. So it was really good to have these trials run and to get some feedback from the users as to what they would like and what should be messaged or brought through on the beacons to help and assist in navigation. So there was some really good feedback, and I'd say 98% said that they would like this sort of technology. So just take the chance to thank Auckland Transport for running the trials at the Newmarket station, and also the blind low vision users for their feedback and willingness to come and trial the technology. We've also got, since then, we've had other councils jump on board, and we've installed some beacons in Tauranga City Council. We've got Wellington City, we've got Greater Wellington Council. We're about to go down and install some beacons into the Human Rights Commission. And the installation you can see on your screen now is a full installation in the Ohmio, which is a school for the blind. And we've got a full beacons and navigation system which runs through the school to their outdoor pathways and also into their dormitories. And we've also linked some virtual beacons from the Ohmio train station leading to the school. So it's been a really good playground, and appreciate Ohmio for taking up the technology. And they've also allowed us to use this to bring people through to demonstrate. So we see this as a great start to what can come in this space. And the more it gets adopted nationally, the better we can help enable and use mobility and accessibility for all. And I guess that's sort of our goal, is to make a difference in the space and also use that technology in this way. We do have some pretty cool innovations coming up where we are looking at connecting the bus drivers directly to a user or a passenger waiting that may be wheelchair, maybe blind, or maybe just elderly that need assistance. And via this technology, we can get them to call direct to the bus driver on the bus that they want that's coming up, so that they don't miss their ride. So yeah, that's a quick brief, and I know I've a little bit over time there, Simon, but I think we'll probably leave it there and just say thanks to ITSNZ for allowing us to come and have a talk.
Yep, absolutely, Scott. That was fantastic, and we're over time, but don't blame yourself for that. I've given everybody, I've been fairly generous with the time, and we've still got a number of people tuned in, so that's fantastic. And we'll get through a couple of quick questions, and I think you may have even answered some of these in your presentation as well. So I've got a couple of questions about, you can look through tinted car windows. That's a yes or no one, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've had really good success, and we knew that was something around the world that people had been struggling with. So we're very happy with the results we get.
Cool, excellent. Can you see young children or baby seats in the back of cars?
Yes, correct. So we can distinguish car seats, and we can get images that will show if there are occupants in those.
Cool. And here's a little bit more technical. What's your percentage of accuracy? This is from Ranjam Pant. What's the percentage of accuracy in different weather conditions? Capture versus reality, he asks. And also, can it work in a high-speed environment like a motorway?
Yeah, cool. So we definitely get success at the moment up to sort of the 80-kilometre marks. We're looking at some trials where we can actually get onto high-speed roads, so we don't have the equipment deployed. We're fairly confident we can, but until we can get some stats on the high-speed roads, we're unable to categorically say. So we are looking forward to that soon, and we hope to get some trials in high speed, but we're pretty confident that we will be able to pick that up, yeah.
Great. That sounds exciting, and nice to be humble until you've got the answers you need, hey?
The accuracy one I will just touch on. We are going to get some stats now that we've been running long enough to really check the accuracy percentages. But what we can say is the accuracy is well above what the manual collection is doing.
Wow. So
our automation has definitely proven to be a lot more accurate and taking less time, and obviously has all those added benefits to the manual enforcement.
Super. Great result. Thanks very much, Scott. Good. Thanks for answering the questions as well. I'm going to jump into just a few quick messages from ITS New Zealand, your hosts today. But before I do that, thank you very much to all of our speakers and everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you got some great value from it. I can see a number of you still listening in, so yeah, great great topics covered, and yeah, as I say, pretty broad topics covered. So upcoming for ITS New Zealand, if you don't know, we've got another event in 1 week's time, an aviation panel. This is another T-Tech Reboot event featuring the likes of Ministry of Transport, CAA, MB, WISC, and Merlin Labs. So some pretty cool stuff happening in that space here in New Zealand you may know of. But we're also looking at kind of how in the future that maybe aviation integrates with other areas of the transport ecosystem. On October 28th, as Ed mentioned, yes, we've got another on-demand webinar. This is a kind of an expert series webinar featuring Liftango, Auckland Transport, Transdev, and Arvida. Arvida, if you're not familiar, they run rest homes here in New Zealand. So looking at those kind of communities. And coming up, and then in November, we'll have our annual general meeting featuring a guest speaker, TBC at this stage. Delayed a little bit because of COVID, of course, there. Big AGM this year. It's a voting AGM, so do head along if you're keen to join the ITS New Zealand board. Nominations are open for that on our website. Finally, a mentoring program that our young transport professionals have worked really hard on getting together is nearly ready to launch. We're still accepting registrations. They've had a lot of interest. I think there are up over 50 registrations, mentors and mentees. Right across the board, right across the country as well, covering all kinds of topics that people are interested in. The launch for the program will officially happen on October 20th, featuring Dr. Masa Mahagida. She's the Director of Women in Technology and a Senior Lecturer at AUT. So it should be a great event there as well, whether you're signed up to be a mentor or mentee, or whether you're just interested to come along and see how it goes. Hoping for big things. Of course, supporting skills development and the young people in our industry is really important for ITS New Zealand as well. And YTP have been doing a fantastic job. This is just another great example of what they've been up to. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today. We'll take your questions and where we can pass them on to the speakers. If we didn't get to your questions today, apologies. We will be providing a recording of this for everybody who's registered here for today. And you should have that up on YouTube within, let's say, early next week. And I'll send out a link to that, and we'll make it publicly available sometime thereafter as well. Thanks once again for all of our speakers. Really interesting topics covered. I know I really enjoyed it, and yes, hope you did too. Thank you very much.